The sky above Viridia was darkening, the stars barely visible behind the heavy haze of smoke rising from the burning colony. Captain Alex Harper stood on the bridge of Aegis, his flagship, eyes fixed on the screen in front of him. The deep, guttural hum of the ship's engines reverberated in the air, a constant reminder of the battle they had just begun. "Sir," Lieutenant Reese called out from the comm station, his voice tight with anxiety. "We're receiving a distress signal from the Viridian Command Center. The Drellians are here." Harper's jaw tightened. He had known this day would come, but the speed of the attack still stunned him. The Drellian Empire, a force that had been expanding at a breakneck pace, had set its sights on the human colonies for months. And now, it seemed Viridia had been their first target. "Patch it through," Harper ordered. His voice was calm, controlled. It had to be. The screen flickered for a moment before the image of General Madeline Voss appeared. Her face was grim, her uniform torn and singed. In the background, the faint sound of gunfire echoed through the transmission. "Captain, we're being overwhelmed," she said, her voice strained. "The Drellian fleet is more advanced than we anticipated. Their weapons are cutting through our defenses like a hot knife through butter. We need reinforcements, or this colony is gone." Harper's mind raced as he processed the information. The Drellians had superior firepower, but humanity had always been resourceful. Their colonies weren't as defenseless as the aliens might believe. The human military had been preparing for something like this. And now, Harper would have to lead them through it. "Hold on, General," Harper said, trying to keep the confidence in his voice. "We'll be there within the hour. Reinforcements are on the way. We're not letting this go down without a fight." He cut the transmission, turning to the rest of the crew. "Prepare for battle. The Drellians are here, and they're not going to get away with this." As the Aegis powered up its weapons and prepared to enter the Viridian system, Harper's mind wandered briefly to his crew. They weren't just soldiers, they were his family. Each one of them had their own reason for being here, fighting for their home, their loved ones, and for each other. But that wouldn't be enough in the face of such overwhelming force. He would need to rely on something deeper: strategy, creativity, and most importantly, the human spirit. The Aegis jumped to warp speed, the stars around them streaking into lines of light. Harper's eyes narrowed as he stared at the blinking red dot that indicated the enemy fleet's position. "Captain," Lieutenant Reese spoke again, his voice tinged with concern. "We're picking up multiple signatures. The Drellian fleet is already in orbit around Viridia. They've launched ground troops." Harper stood taller. "I know. We won't let them have the planet." The Aegis dropped out of warp, the eerie silence of space briefly overwhelming them as they hovered on the outskirts of the Viridian system. Ahead of them, the Drellian ships loomed, sleek, formidable, and unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Their hulls shimmered with a dark, metallic sheen, their designs both elegant and deadly. "All hands, prepare for combat," Harper ordered. "Target the largest Drellian ship. We're going for a knockout punch." His orders were met with swift compliance. The crew moved in synchronized efficiency, each knowing their role. The Aegis's guns powered up, the pulse cannons humming in anticipation. "Captain," Lieutenant Reese said, breaking Harper's focus. "We've got a comms channel open from the Drellian flagship." Harper turned sharply. "Patch it through." The screen flickered again, and a tall, imposing figure appeared. Queen Krauthera, her eyes cold and calculating, looked down at the camera as though she were staring directly at Harper. The metallic sheen of her skin and the alien elegance of her uniform gave her an air of both beauty and menace. "Human," she said, her voice smooth but laced with disdain. "Your colonies are pathetic. You've had your time. Now, it's ours." Harper's grip tightened on the armrest of his chair. "You've made a mistake, Krauthera. We don't give up our home so easily." She smiled, but it wasn't a reassuring gesture. "We've already won. You just don't realize it yet. Your resistance is futile." Her transmission ended abruptly, leaving a cold silence in its wake. Harper's eyes narrowed. The Drellians were known for their arrogance, their belief that they were the galaxy's superior race. They had never faced a force like humanity. "All batteries, fire at will," Harper ordered. "Let's show them just how wrong they are." The Aegis's weapons came to life. A barrage of energy bolts shot toward the Drellian flagship. The beams collided with the enemy ship's shields, causing massive ripples of energy. But the Drellian shields held firm, absorbing the hits without much visible damage. "Direct hit, Captain," Reese reported, his voice a little less sure now. "But their shields are holding. They're stronger than we thought." Harper gritted his teeth. "Keep firing. We need to push them back." The battle raged on, the Aegis's weapons firing relentlessly at the enemy, but the Drellian ships were more maneuverable, their weapons far more advanced than anything humanity had ever seen. The human fleet was being driven back, outgunned and outclassed. "Captain, we need to consider a retreat," Reese said, a trace of panic in his voice. "We're not going to win this without reinforcements." Harper stared at the screen, his mind racing. A retreat wasn't an option, not while Viridia, and the thousands of civilians on the ground, were under attack. The Drellians would conquer them all, without hesitation. "No retreat," Harper said firmly. "We hold the line. Reinforcements are on their way." And then, from beneath the surface of Viridia, a pulse of strange energy flared up. A shockwave rippled through the system, the ground troops of the Drellians faltering for a brief moment. Harper's eyes widened. "What the hell was that?" "Sir, I'm detecting an energy signature," Reese said. "It's coming from the planet's surface. It's massive." Harper turned to his crew. "We need to investigate that source. It could be our only hope." But as the Drellian fleet advanced, Harper knew time was running out. The war for Viridia had just begun. And now, humanity had a chance, but only if they could find out what that energy pulse meant. The Aegis's engines hummed as the ship hovered over the burning surface of Viridia. Captain Alex Harper stared at the screen, his mind reeling from the inexplicable pulse of energy that had shaken the battlefield. His thoughts whirred like gears in a machine, each one turning toward the unknown. "Captain," Lieutenant Reese said, breaking his focus. "The energy signature's growing stronger. It's coming from the old ruins near Viridia's southern continent." Harper's pulse quickened. The southern continent was known for its ancient, unexplored ruins, relics from a time long before humanity's first footsteps on the planet. No one had ever investigated the area until now. The pulse was their only lead, a faint thread of hope in a rapidly deteriorating situation. "Set course for the coordinates," Harper ordered. "All hands, prepare for a landing. We're going in." His crew moved quickly, their steps heavy with the weight of the mission ahead. They had no time to waste. Every second spent in orbit meant more Drellian forces were gaining ground. Harper could feel the pressure mounting as the Aegis began its descent toward the southern continent. The shuttle bay doors opened with a low groan as Harper, accompanied by a small team of soldiers, prepared to embark on the mission. He took a deep breath, checking his pulse rifle, making sure it was charged and ready. Reese stood beside him, his face grim, his usual confidence gone. "Sir, the Drellians will be expecting us," Reese said quietly. "This isn't just a random pulse. They must know something's down there." "I know," Harper replied, his voice low but steady. "That's why we need to find it first. We have no choice." The shuttle detached from the Aegis, and they cut through the atmosphere, speeding toward the planet's surface. The landscape below was a harsh contrast to the peaceful world they had once known. Cratered fields, jagged mountains, and the wreckage of destroyed cities dotted the terrain. Viridia had been the pride of humanity's colonization efforts, until the Drellians came. As the shuttle descended toward the ruins, Harper's eyes scanned the landscape, his mind racing through the possible scenarios. What could have caused that pulse of energy? And more importantly, why hadn't anyone discovered it before? The shuttle touched down with a soft thud, and the crew rushed out, forming a perimeter around the ship. Harper led the way, his boots crunching against the dry, cracked earth. The ruins loomed ahead, massive stone structures, half buried by centuries of neglect. Vines and moss clung to the walls, and a deep sense of mystery hung in the air. Harper could feel the weight of history pressing down on him, but there was no time to dwell on it. Every moment was precious. "Keep your eyes peeled," Harper ordered as they approached the entrance to the ruins. "If the Drellians are here, they're watching us." The entrance was a massive stone archway, the symbols carved into its surface worn by time. As they stepped inside, the temperature dropped noticeably. The air was thick, almost as if the ruins themselves were alive, holding some dark secret deep within their walls. The team moved cautiously, weapons at the ready. The faint pulse of energy was now unmistakable, growing stronger with each step they took. They followed it deeper into the ruins, winding through narrow passages and vast, empty chambers. "Captain," Sergeant Daniels said, his voice tense. "There's something ahead." Harper signaled for the team to halt. They approached carefully, entering a large chamber at the heart of the ruins. At the center of the room stood a massive stone pedestal, and on it, a strange object pulsed with an eerie blue glow. It was unlike anything Harper had ever seen, a crystalline structure, jagged and angular, almost as if it were a living entity. "That's it," Harper murmured, his voice barely audible. "That's the source of the energy." He stepped forward, his heart racing. As his fingers brushed against the surface of the artifact, a low hum filled the room, vibrating through the stone walls. The energy signature spiked, and Harper pulled his hand back quickly. "What the hell is this?" Reese asked, his voice tinged with awe. "I don't know," Harper replied, his eyes never leaving the artifact. "But it's what we've been looking for." Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed in the distance. Harper's head snapped toward the entrance. It was too late to run. The Drellians had found them. "Get to the shuttle, now!" Harper shouted, his voice urgent. "Move!" The team turned to leave, but as they did, the room seemed to shift. The walls trembled, and the artifact glowed brighter, its pulse now rhythmic, as if it were alive. Harper could feel the energy reverberating through his body. "Captain, we can't leave it!" Daniel shouted, his eyes locked on the artifact. "This could be our only chance to turn the tide." Harper hesitated, his gaze flicking between the artifact and the encroaching Drellian soldiers. Time was running out. He had to make a decision, and fast. "We don't have a choice," Harper said, his voice hard. "We take the artifact, or we die here." The team moved swiftly, pulling the artifact from its pedestal. As soon as it was in their hands, a surge of power exploded from the artifact, and the room was flooded with blinding light. Harper instinctively shielded his eyes, but he could feel the power coursing through him. It was overwhelming, like nothing he had ever experienced before. "Captain!" Reese shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of energy. "We need to get out of here, now!" With the artifact in hand, the team raced back toward the shuttle. The ground shook violently beneath them as the Drellian soldiers closed in, their weapons raised. Harper's heart pounded in his chest as they reached the shuttle, the doors opening just in time. They piled inside, and the shuttle shot into the sky, narrowly escaping the Drellian forces below. As they ascended, Harper looked down at the ruins, now just a fading memory beneath them. The artifact pulsed with energy in his hands, and for the first time since the battle began, a glimmer of hope flickered in his heart. This was humanity's chance, their last hope. But the fight was far from over. The Drellians would stop at nothing to claim this power for themselves. And Harper knew that if they didn't learn to control the artifact, the consequences could be catastrophic. "Hold on," Harper said, his voice low but resolute. "We're going to need everything we've got." The Aegis was already back in orbit, its massive bulk hovering above the charred remnants of Viridia's once thriving cities. Captain Alex Harper stood on the bridge, staring at the screens as the Drellian fleet regrouped. He didn't need to look at the tactical readouts to know that time was running out. The Drellians were preparing for one final push, a full-scale assault that could wipe out humanity's foothold in this corner of the galaxy. "Captain," Reese said, his voice strained, "the Drellians are moving their ships into attack formation. It looks like they're going for a decisive strike." Harper clenched his jaw. They think they've already won. But they're wrong. He turned to the tactical officer, Lieutenant Torres, who was hunched over the command console. How long until we can activate the artifact? Torres glanced at the readouts and then at Harper. It's unstable, Captain. We don't fully understand its mechanisms. If we power it up without the right precautions, we could destroy everything, ourselves included. Harper's eyes narrowed. The artifact, a crystalline object of immense power, was their last hope. The pulse they'd detected on the planet's surface had been its call to arms, and now, it was humanity's only weapon capable of countering the Drellian advantage. But the risks were overwhelming. The unknown could be just as dangerous as the Drellians. I know the risks, Harper said firmly. But if we don't use it, we're dead anyway. Activate it. Now. Torres hesitated but nodded. She moved quickly, her fingers flying across the console, initiating the sequence. A low hum filled the bridge as the artifact's power began to surge. The crew tensed, unsure of what would happen next. The air seemed to crackle with energy, and for a brief moment, Harper thought the entire ship would implode. But then, a wave of force rolled out from the artifact, and the ship's systems stabilized. It's working, Captain, Torres said, her voice tinged with disbelief. The energy readings are stabilizing. We've tapped into the artifact's power. Good, Harper said, exhaling sharply. Now, let's show them what humanity is capable of. The Aegis moved into position above Viridia, and the battle began in earnest. The Drellian fleet unleashed a barrage of firepower at the planet, their energy weapons streaking across the sky like deadly stars. The human ships retaliated, but their weapons felt weak in comparison to the overwhelming Drellian firepower. For a moment, it seemed like humanity's fleet might crumble beneath the assault. But then, the artifact's power surged through the Aegis. Harper's heart raced as he felt the ship respond to the energy, its systems suddenly empowered in ways they hadn't been before. The shields flickered, then solidified, absorbing the Drellian's weapons' fire with ease. Sir, we're getting a feedback loop, Torres said, her voice tense. The artifact it's amplifying our systems. The energy's stronger than we thought. Harper's eyes flashed with determination. Good. Let's put it to use. The Aegis's weapons systems came online with a newfound intensity. The pulse cannons fired with a deafening roar, and their shots hit Drellian ships with pinpoint precision. The previously invulnerable Drellian fleet was now being pushed back. Energy shields crackled under the pressure, and for the first time, Harper saw the Drellians faltering. Target their flagship, Harper ordered, his voice calm but full of authority. We take down Kralthara, and the rest of them will fall. The Aegis fired another volley, and the Drellian flagship's shields faltered. But just as victory seemed within reach, a new threat emerged. A massive Drellian warship, larger than anything humanity had ever faced, appeared from the far side of the system, its weapons primed and ready. Captain, they've sent their biggest ship into the fray, Reese reported. This one has enough firepower to wipe us out in seconds. Harper's grip tightened on the armrest. We're not backing down now. Give it everything we've got. The crew sprang into action, coordinating their efforts with precision. The Aegis surged forward, its engines roaring as it closed the gap between itself and the colossal Drellian warship. Energy beams from the enemy ship lashed out, but the Aegis's enhanced shields absorbed the blows. We're too close, Reese said. We can't avoid their fire anymore. Harper's mind raced. The Drellians had the superior firepower, but they lacked one thing, humanity's ingenuity. Harper could see it now, the weakness in their approach. The Drellians were overconfident, too sure of their technology. They thought brute force would win the day. We don't need to avoid their fire, Harper said, his eyes narrowing. We need to use it against them. He issued the command, and the Aegis's systems adjusted in real time. The energy from the Drellian warship's weapons was siphoned into the artifact, which acted as an energy conduit. The artifact hummed louder, drawing more and more power into itself until it reached a critical threshold. Captain, we've reached maximum energy, Torres said, a hint of panic in her voice. "If we push any further, we risk catastrophic failure." Harper nodded, his expression hard. "It's now or never." The Aegis unleashed a final, devastating blast, a concentrated beam of pure energy that collided with the Drellian warship's exposed core. The impact was catastrophic. The Drellian flagship exploded in a violent burst of light and debris, sending shockwaves through the surrounding fleet. Ships around it fell, their systems overloading in the wake of the blast. But the victory was short-lived. The Drellians, enraged by the loss of their flagship, retaliated with everything they had. Their remaining fleet fired relentlessly, and the Aegis took several direct hits. Sparks flew from consoles, and the ship's systems began to fail. "We're taking too much damage," Reese shouted. "We can't hold them off much longer." Harper's mind raced, but his resolve never wavered. "Activate the artifact again. All energy into the ship's weapons." Torres hesitated. "But Captain, we don't have the power left. We're on the brink of a meltdown." Harper's voice was cold, determined. "We fight until the end. This is humanity's last stand." With a deafening roar, the artifact powered up once more, and the Aegis's weapons fired in a final, desperate barrage. The Drellian ships faltered, their shields cracking, their hulls splintering under the intense onslaught. One by one, they began to fall. As the last Drellian warship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, Harper slumped into his chair, exhausted but resolute. The battlefield was quiet now, the wreckage of the Drellian fleet drifting in the void. "We did it," Reese said, his voice soft with disbelief. Harper nodded slowly. "We did. But it's not over. The Drellians will come again. And next time," Reese said, "we'll be ready." Harper looked out at the wreckage of the Drellian fleet, his heart heavy but determined. The war wasn't over, but humanity had proven one undeniable truth: they were a force to be reckoned with. "We'll be ready," Harper said, his voice steady. "We'll make sure of it." The silence in the aftermath of the battle was almost deafening. The Aegis floated in the void, battered and bruised but still alive. Harper stood on the bridge, staring at the wreckage of the Drellian fleet. The space around them was littered with debris, twisted pieces of Drellian warships, floating as reminders of the brutal conflict that had just unfolded. "We've done it," Lieutenant Reese said, his voice filled with disbelief, his hands trembling slightly as he examined the damage reports. "They're gone. The fleet is finished." Harper didn't respond immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the debris, his mind already moving past the immediate relief. Victory came at a price, a heavy price. The Aegis had suffered significant damage, and many of the crew were injured, some critically. Yet, they had done the impossible. They had repelled the Drellians. But there was something nagging at the back of Harper's mind, an unsettling feeling that wouldn't let go. "Captain," Reese continued, still digesting the scale of the victory, "we've received a transmission from Earth Command. They want to debrief you." Harper's thoughts shifted, and he turned away from the view. "Put them through." A moment later, General Voss's image flickered on the screen, her face haggard but resolute. Despite the weariness in her eyes, there was an unspoken acknowledgement of the success. "Harper," she said, her voice tinged with exhaustion, "you did it. The Drellian threat is broken. You've saved Viridia." "Not just Viridia, General," Harper replied, his voice steady but carrying the weight of everything they'd been through. "We've saved the entire colony network. The Drellians won't come back anytime soon. Not after this. I don't know how you pulled it off, but your decision to use the artifact, it was a gamble. A dangerous one. But it worked. It worked because humanity is willing to sacrifice everything," Harper said. "We didn't rely on technology alone. We fought with everything we had." Voss nodded slowly, then her expression hardened. "That's all well and good, but there's a new problem. The artifact, Harper. We need to understand what it really is. This victory might have bought us time, but we don't know what we're dealing with." Harper's jaw tightened. He knew the truth of it. The artifact's power was unlike anything they had ever encountered. The sudden surge of energy, the almost sentient way it responded to their need, it was both a gift and a curse. No one could fully understand the consequences of using it, especially without knowing its origin. "I agree, General," Harper replied, his mind whirring. "I'll have the science team begin their analysis immediately. But we need more than just an answer about its power. We need to understand how to control it." Voss's eyes darkened. "And that's where the danger lies. If the Drellians were willing to sacrifice their fleet to control it, imagine what other species might do if they find out about it. We can't let that happen." Harper nodded. "Understood. I'll coordinate with the science team to gather all the data we can. We'll figure this out before anyone else can." "We're counting on you," Voss said, her voice softening briefly. "You've given us a chance. Now, we have to make sure we don't waste it." The transmission ended, and the screen flickered back to the starry void. Harper stood still for a moment, processing the weight of the situation. They had won, but the war wasn't over. It had just begun in a new, more dangerous form. "Captain," Reese called out, his voice breaking through Harper's thoughts. "We've received a signal from the remaining colony ships. They're requesting immediate evacuation. The Drellian forces had infiltrated their outer defenses before we destroyed the fleet. We're going to need every ship we have to ensure their safety." Harper exhaled sharply, rubbing his forehead. "How many ships are left?" "Not many," Reese replied, scrolling through the data. "The Drellians had already disabled a significant number. There are a few still operational, but the rest are stuck, floating in the debris fields. They won't last long without help." Harper nodded, his mind already shifting into tactical mode. "Set a course for the nearest ship. We'll go in and pull them out. No one gets left behind." Reese hesitated. "Sir, you're pushing us hard. The Aegis is barely holding together, and the crew is exhausted." "I know," Harper said quietly. "But we don't have a choice. Those ships are our future. If we don't get them out now, everything we've fought for will be lost." The Aegis moved through the wreckage of the battlefield, its engines strained but steady. Harper stood at the helm, his mind focused on the mission ahead. The colony ships were scattered across the debris field, drifting without power. They were sitting ducks in the vast emptiness of space, their crews vulnerable to whatever remained of the Drellians' forces or even other hostile factions. "We're closing in on the first ship," Reese said. "No signs of hostile activity. It's adrift, but the crew's still aboard." Harper gave a terse nod. "Prepare to board. Let's make sure they're all right." The Aegis docked with the ship, and the airlock sealed with a loud thud. Harper, Reese, and a small team of soldiers moved quickly to the entry hatch. The ship was eerily quiet, its corridors dim and abandoned. The crew must have been hiding, unsure of what had happened to their fleet or what had come next. "Captain Harper," a voice echoed from the shadows. Harper spun around to find General Voss's familiar face on the small terminal. Her image flickered but was still recognizable. "General, we've secured the first ship. We're beginning evacuation protocols now." "I knew you'd come through," Voss replied, her voice steady but tired. "But don't get comfortable. The Drellians won't be far behind. You have to move fast. I've just received word from command, there's been a shift in the balance of power. The Drellians are regrouping on their homeworld, and they'll be coming for everything we've taken. Be ready." Harper's eyes darkened. "We're ready. We'll make sure of it." As the crew moved to evacuate the remaining civilians and military personnel, Harper felt a surge of determination. This wasn't the end. Not yet. Humanity had shown its strength, but now, the true test was about to begin. He stood still for a moment, watching the stars through the viewport. The battle wasn't over. The Drellians would return. And when they did, humanity would be ready. "Prepare the fleet," he said, his voice low and resolute. "We're going to make sure they never get this close again."